The challenge is that the numbers are not encouraging, and the party is no longer united.
Van Jones is still clearly a little grief-stricken by events. Did you know that I met Van Jones once on Richard Branson's Billionaire Island? Did I tell you that? Like an idiot, I went to Richard Branson's Billionaire Island because I was invited and because I was foolish and thought, thank God I weren't invited to any other billionaire islands, because who knows what choices I would have made. But I was invited to Richard Branson's one, and it was actually pretty boring. I went with my girlfriend, but who was there was that guy Simon Sinek was there, Van Jones was there, Richard Branson was there, and my favourite moment was watching Richard Branson teaching Van Jones to swim, cradling him by the abdomen in a swimming pool. I went off grid for a moment and walked around another bit of the island. I had to be ferried off that island almost by escape. And given that Richard Branson owns airlines, it was pretty difficult to get a flight off that island when I needed one. Let me tell you. So here is Van Jones in his grief dealing with the fallout of this situation. Let's have a look.
Well, look, I mean, he's still in the race, and he's doing what he's supposed to do. I'm glad to see him out there. I'm glad he's doing interviews. I'm glad he's doing all those things. The challenge is that the numbers are not encouraging, and the party is no longer united. You already have 4 House Democrats who are saying step down. You're going to have more. You're going to have more. This week, unfortunately, you're going to have the split screen of the president having, NATO allies here, and people in his own party looking at this math. As David Axelrod said, this time 4 years ago, Biden was up 10. He's down 6. We needed that debate to turn things around. It did turn things around in a negative direction. And so I think that he's going to have to look in his heart. This is a party that loves him. I've never heard so many people say about a politician, I love this man. Not just I respect him, not just I admire him. I love Joe Biden. He is beloved in this party. And yet he may not be able to get us across the finish line.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I don't like to stay within the accepted parameters of political discourse. I always feel that when I'm accepting their talking points, I'm accepting their agenda. And I so resolutely believe that we need a profound and spiritual solution that literally transcends our current institutions. That when I sort of show Van Jones making this point, or Lawrence O'Donnell making that point, or even a pro-right-wing pundit making X, Y, or Z point, that I'm existing within the sphere of their limitations. But it's just interesting, I think, to watch the manoeuvring in the same way as you might spectate on a football match, which is probably on my mind because England are kicking off against the Netherlands in about an hour in a very important football match, which I will enjoy. It's not that I don't like Van Jones even, actually, because when I met Van Jones on that island, he was a very nice person. And he sort of talked about working for Barack Obama and how he got sacked by Barack Obama because he'd set up some new Green Deal stuff to do with renewable energy. He was saying this sort of like in a sort of a public forum, albeit on a billionaire island. And I remember thinking, this guy's all right. And as the political space continued to evolve and it became clear to me that the real baddies were the neoliberal establishment, it was weird to see people that I knew that are all right people, occupants of it. I feel the same way about Whoopi Goldberg, because remember, when I was in Hollywood and being an actor and all that stuff, I would go on shows like The View. And Whoopi Goldberg, for me, Whoopi Goldberg's the woman out of Ghost. She's the stand-up comedian that's friends with Robin Williams. Whoopi Goldberg, for me, is a good example of a funny person who made it in entertainment. And yet now, it's just extraordinary to watch the sort of hyper-politicization of previously, I don't want to say innocuous in a condemnatory way, or anodyne in a way that's pejorative, but figures that were not carrying a lot of political heat. Like Jerry Seinfeld now is controversial because people turn up at his shows and because he's a Jewish guy, and that probably, one assumes, comes with a particular set of beliefs around the subject of Israel. And maybe that's what it's like within the culture as well. People have sort of affiliations that are inbred, and it's just difficult to sort of wake up in the machine and go, well, hold on a minute, this is bullshit. This is bullshit. Maybe it's hard to do that. I didn't do it voluntarily. I'll tell you that. I didn't do it voluntarily. Let's have a look at Whoopi Goldberg saying that just because someone shits themselves, it doesn't mean they shouldn't be the leader of the free world.
I don't care if he's pooped his pants. I don't care if he can't put a sentence together. Show me he can't do the job, and then I'll say, okay, maybe it's time to go. Now, he had a bad night the first time that he went out and debated with Kamala Harris. And everybody wanted him to quit then, say you can't talk to women like this, or you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. He came back, said, you know what, I got it, and gave 4 years. So yeah, I have poopy days all the time. I step in so much poo you can't even imagine.
Step in, not deliver through the old bowel. In a sense, if you are a host on The View, you live in, I've been on there a couple of times, there are a bunch of producers backstage, and I don't think that it seems insidious or nefarious when you're participating in the culture. At least it didn't when I was doing it, when I was being on MTV or hosting the VMA Awards or showing up at the Oscars or doing a bunch of talk shows. I just felt like, yeah, I am important. What I'm doing is important. It's only now I realise that what I'm doing is not important. No one is doing anything important unless we're being kind and of loving service. And that's actually why I'm realising that I don't want to sort of like vehemently criticise and condemn people for having views that are understandable given their cultural allotment, the place that they live within. In the same way, wouldn't you be sympathetic if it was some cousin of yours was a smackhead, a junkie, addicted to heroin? You'd be like, oh, well, his dad used to beat him up or whatever. You'd find you'd find a way to love, wouldn't you? You would find a way to love. And maybe that's what we have to do. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just a sentimental little darling, but it seems to me that love might, after all, be the answer. We can't continue to bring you this beautiful content without the support of our partners. AirsTech, the world's only scientifically proven electromagnetic field protection chip trusted by experts. AirsTech is now, can you believe this, an official partner of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the UFC, giving support for world-class athletes who want to safeguard themselves from excessive electromagnetic radiation. We're all going to want that protection soon. Elite athletes within the UFC are unique in their need to optimize their performance in 25-minute bursts. AirsTech understand the importance of optimal recovery and peak performance. Trusted and used by pro athletes all around the world to elevate their game, EMF modulation technology solutions help them train harder, recover faster, and perform at their best. And wouldn't we all benefit from that? I know that I would. I keep this one device here. It's protecting me from that. It's protecting me from a whole lot of things. Get out, Russian hackers. Go to airstech.com/pages/Russell-brand. There's a link, and use the code Russell30 for 30% off. So click the link under this and use the code Russell30, 2 S's, 2 L's for 30% off this device. Protect yourself from invisible fields of detrimental vibration. Back to the content. All right, so let's have a look at Bernie Sanders. He is also just advocating for Bernie Sanders for a minute, and I don't know what you lot thought about it. Like, for a minute, it was like Bernie Sanders, I'm going to bring down the banks. I'm going to bring down the banks. I'm going to bring them down. I'm going to bring down the banks and the financial establishment. He was like a politician that came out of the Occupy movement. I don't mean through some literal connection, but the sort of ambient and archetypal energy that came out of the Occupy movement that was anti-establishment, anti-big business, and anti-finance. I spoke to the filmmaker Adam Curtis at that time, and he sort of challenged an audience when we were doing sort of a live show. Adam Curtis is brilliant. Look up his work. And he said to the audience, what is it you want? What is it you want? Like, because it was in the sort of moment of like disgust after the 2008 financial collapse. What is it you want? Just for the banks to be a bit nicer? Is that your vision? And it's not going to be enough, is it? Regulating the financial industry. And it might not even be enough if you take control of the borders. And it might not even be enough if you get out of all foreign wars. And it might not even be enough if you take money out of politics, because that's still not a vision, is it? It's still, do you ever just sit for a moment and feel the hum of these disgusting demonic systems? Do you feel it? Like what it is? Like, do you allow it to sort of penetrate you for a moment? It's not going to be enough to just go, well, if we were to put 10% more into pensions, and if we were to buy 5%, and if we were to move it, it's not going to be enough. This is a moment of radical revolution that is going to have to be so sort of potent in its central ideological thrust that whether or not you previously thought Che Guevara was magnificent, or whether or not you thought Ronald Reagan was a real doll, those kind of things just are sloughed off, shed like snakeskin, as you recognize something different has to emerge now. It's not going to be enough to accept the discourse of a system that has self-preservation as the center of its creed. You know that somehow already. Okay, let's have a look at our man, Bernie Sanders, who for a minute was a anti-establishment figure, but as is often the case, was consumed back into the system for reasons I don't fully understand.
Let me say this, and maybe the most important point, Bob, I want to make this morning. What we are talking about now is not a Grammy Award contest for Best Singer. Biden is old. He's not as articulate as he once was. I wish he could jump up the steps on Air Force One. He can't.
But again, that's just the reframing. It's a bit more serious than that. We're not talking about someone spryly leaping up the steps to Air Force One or someone that can't do freestyle rap battles. We're talking about such a lack of cognitive ability that it becomes impossible to believe that this person has any real power, and therefore you can extrapolate that power is elsewhere. And now we live in a fully immersive media space where there are continual, what about the Rockefeller family? And what about the deep state? And what about these historic bloodlines? And what's causing that war? Like, that's why this stuff is important, because if Joe Biden is palpably incapable of wielding political power, then who holds that power? We can answer that question in a number of ways. It's the deep state, it's global corporatists, it's the acronym bureaucracies, NATO, etc. You might have more occultist takes on it. But what we can now see is that we're kind of right. We're kind of right that there is a cartel of curious institutions and sects that are able to maneuver power. To stay within that which can be corroborated, just look at the wealth transfer that happened during the pandemic period, and you can sort of, these kind of interests seem to have significant influence. Have a look at what companies donate to both political parties or powerfully lobby. All of that stuff is pretty important, isn't it? That's an indicator, but maybe it goes even deeper than that. Maybe it does. Man, we got time to go into this smoking stuff? Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.